And the reason I had to say to people we're sending logic on a coffee break is that people are really quick when we use some of metaphor. Let's think about the problem as if it was a landscape. Is as soon as they get an insight, they want to try and translate it and bring logic back in again to translate it. And it's as if, no, we need to deep dive into the metaphor. We need to gather all of the information, and then we'll invite logic back.
Welcome to the People Powered Solutions podcast. In this show, you'll gain expert advice and tips on building a thriving workplace culture with happy employees. I'm your host, Lorianne Duguay, and I'm thrilled to be spending this time with you today. Hello, and welcome to another episode of People Powered podcast. Folks, for those who have been listening, I have on more than one occasion shared my story and the inspiration behind the book, The Happiness Factor, being that I was working at the same large-scale organization for 21 years, and for approximately 15 at least of those 21 years, I felt completely checked out. I felt completely stuck. I really had no clue what was going on, what was missing, couldn't even decide whether or not my current work environment wouldn't allow me to get that spark going again and get checked back in. Over time, after lots of research, which of course is why I ended up writing the book, I realized that there are 10 needs that need to be fulfilled at work in order for someone to feel happy, productive, and completely checked in. That is why we invited today's guest on the show. She specializes in helping people get unstuck, in helping teams get unstuck as well. So we're hoping to be able to offer our listeners some insights relevant to how to get unstuck, but also to benefit from her interesting approach to covering some of these concepts. So welcome, Alison Smith.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Excited to have you on this show. Alison, before we get this party started, how about you share with our audience how Alison got to doing what Alison does today?
I started in business, and I was introduced to using metaphor because I'm in procurement, so it's in buying, and I don't know how many of your audience if they're not in purchasing, getting excited about purchasing. Well, we've got a lot of managers that weren't excited about it, but we've got a lot of problems with suppliers. And I realized that going in, let's go in with the logic, let's go in with the procurement tools and techniques. Everybody glazed over. But as soon as I started talking about gardening and, if you've got a garden, it needs to be pruned, it needs to be weeded, it needed to be watered. Suddenly, and then we said, and that's the same for your suppliers. Suddenly they would all think, oh, yeah, we've got suppliers popping up all over the place. We're not looking after them. And so I suppose that's when I realized the power of metaphor to actually communicate so much more quickly and excitingly, because these people were not interested in what we were talking about, but really engaged and got what we were saying as soon as we started talking about gardening. So that was my introduction to metaphor. I think why I then realized that how effective it was at getting unstuck is because I was, we were getting divorced. It wasn't happening in my job, but my logical mind can run rings around me, and therefore it will defend the story I'm telling myself about how bad everything is, and how there isn't anything I can do about it, and how it's everybody else's fault. And what I realized was these metaphors got me out of that thinking, because I had to leave my story and push my story to one side to engage with the metaphor. And so that was a huge aha for me. And then that meant beautifully that I was going and learning coaching. My boss at the time, we were merging two departments, and my boss said, you can be the team coach. Yay. So thank you for that, because it just meant that I could try out metaphors. So I could have the team walking out in nature and coming up with vision setting days using what they were seeing in nature. So yeah, that's where it all started really. So that was sort of in the 2000. So up till then, it had been a very traditional business, professional in procurement. And then I suppose since then, I'd say I've been more a business coach than, although I do still do a lot of it within procurement arena.
Interesting. Absolutely interesting. Now, a few things. I'm also a lover of metaphors. I use them throughout my book as well as analogies. And at one point, I use a lot of plant analogies as well as gardening, because when you think about a team, I always liken it to a garden. And, if you tend to it, if you foster it, it will grow, it will get stronger, right? But at one point in the book, I say something along the lines of, I promise this is my last plant analogy, because I've said so many of them. I'm a huge plant lover. As you can see, for those who are watching on YouTube, instead of just listening in, I've got a number of plants behind me. I am a huge plant lover. So I agree that providing that analogy or that metaphor, whatever the case may be, really provides a way of thinking outside the box, but also making it resonate, making it make sense in your mind, whatever you're struggling with. And then it'll also offer kind of those alternate perspectives on how I could potentially troubleshoot. The other thing I really enjoyed about your story you just shared, kind of how you came to do what you're doing, is when you said that our stories can run circles around us. Those narratives, that mind chatter, it is powerful. And I love that you're saying that metaphors have the power to take you away and to have you take it one step sideways and get that kind of alternate perspective on that narrative. So if you don't mind, I would love for you to share a bit more about what that's about.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about I call it sending logic on a coffee break. And the reason I do that is that I do, as part of what I do, creative problem solving sessions with people, with teams. And what I was finding was, I can get quite annoyed about the fact that most people don't use creative problem solving tools. They use logical creative problem solving tools. But anyway, let's not go down that route, because we'll be.
Well, I kind of want to go down that route and figure out what the nuance between the two are.
Oh, well, you see, for me, it comes back to the logical thinking piece. It's that whole, for me, it's as if we've got a part of our brain that's logical and therefore thinks very consecutively, very logically. It's all filed. And creative thinking is in pictures, is in metaphor. So, and I keep going back to these lists of problem solving tools. And I've yet to really see many of them. They don't say go for a walk. They don't say a metaphor. They don't say drawing. They don't say do a dance. They say let's put the thinking hats on that are all certain colours, where they're all the colours, and the thinking hats. Each of the colours means something very logical. And I for me, absolutely, they're effective problem solving tools, but they're not creative. So for me, there's something, the metaphor, and the reason I had to say to people we're sending logic on a coffee break is that people are really quick when we use some of metaphor. Let's think about the problem as if it was a landscape. Is as soon as they get an insight, they want to try and translate it and bring logic back in again to translate it. And it's as if no, we need to deep dive into the metaphor. We need to gather all of the information, and then we'll invite logic back. I did do a graphic about it saying we're sending logic on a holiday. Only problem about that was logic hears us saying we're sending on a holiday and resists for every second that it's away, and therefore keeps coming back and tapping us and saying, no, what about this? What about that? So if you say to logic, because our brain will do what we tell it. So if we say to logic, and I am really overt in workshops about this, we are sending, and I'll have a sign that says logic, and I'll have coffee cups for the logic to go to. And it's that, okay, we're sending logic on a coffee break. Logic, everybody's logic. We'll be back in 45 minutes, or we're back in an hour. You will have plenty to play with once you've allowed us this time to be creative. But please go for your coffee break. You've worked hard today. Please stay there. We've put your cakes in. Whatever metaphor, if I'm honest, enables people to relax into, we're going to do something different. Yeah, it's using a different part of our brain. Yes, I might need to then manage expectations that if we don't use that part of our brain often, it can feel a bit funny. But, if I say to people, think of a problem, now draw it as a mountain, which is one of the simplest techniques that I have, I would say 90% of people can do that.
Yeah.
90% of people can draw their problem as if it's a mountain. So it's like literally draw it, a couple of minutes. Is it, how big is the mountain? How steep is it?
How high? Yeah.
Yeah. And then let's make changes to it. If that problem was solved, what would it look like? And then it wouldn't be as steep, and it would have paths. And somebody the other week said, "Oh, I'm not in the drawing." So it was as if it was as if for them, and I'm not saying that everybody always has themselves in the drawing, but for that particular person, drawing a mountain and relating to it as if it was something outside of them and they were somewhere else different meant that they weren't, that it was as if this problem was something away from them. Whereas as soon as they drew themselves next to the mountain, they knew what they needed to do.
They needed to take ownership of that mountain.
Yeah.
Like it. That is super interesting. I like the approach. I have to say, though, as someone who I use psychometric tools a lot, and I'm a huge fan of everything DISC, the DISC model, I would have to gander that there's certain personality styles that struggle to send logic to the coffee break. They struggle more to send them to the coffee break. And I have two styles in particular that are very action-oriented, task-oriented, and will even discount or kind of believe someone is not credible if they're not presenting information in a very logical, sequential way.
Which is where, in that instance, you're right. I have to get sort of gather a pace to get people to think of, in what instances are you creative? Why is it working? So it is a lot more, I suppose, building up a bit more of the logic behind why metaphor works, why going out, why sending logic on a coffee break is useful, to try it out. I also think, I've done presentations to engineers where you'd expect them to be, is it blue in quite blue in DISC? Is DISC blue or is DISC?
DISC isn't color related. It's really DISC, so dominant, influencer, dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And the conscientiousness are the more logic-driven, data, analytics, fear of failure, because failure can be avoided with proper planning types.
I get you. So I think some of it is the fact that I absolutely believe the majority of people. So I do go in with a belief that they will be able to get it, and I do think that helps. Quite often I'll have done other things first, so they sort of have trust in me has built up a little bit. So they'll be going, well, she got us to do that, and that was a bit weird, but it worked. And I suppose there's also something about, it might feel silly, but it's method in my madness. It's like, I would never ask anybody to do anything if I didn't think it might have the potential.
You didn't know it actually works. Yeah. And I think that's where you're winning in how you frame, because there's a way to frame information or an approach or a methodology with all the different styles. And by coming in with, as you said, kind of ahead of time saying, here's the logic behind the approach, here's why it works, here is what it's costing you to not send logic to the coffee break. By prefacing it with that, then you're absolutely speaking to all of those styles, and you can get them on board. Okay, so how about you share with us maybe some quick wins in terms of strategies that you have used and seen success with when it comes to problem solving and to troubleshooting, when they're apart from the typical, let's brainstorm some solutions here. Yeah, look at you. For those who are not, those who are only listening, Alison just had like this cringe face going on when I said, let's brainstorm. I think she's not the biggest fan of the brainstorms. So let's see what she would suggest to do alternatively.
Depending on where you are, I would invite the team to go out for a walk in nature together and to see whatever landscape in front of them represents the current problem, and then talk about how they could solve it. So, for example, I had one team where they went for a walk and they were walking down like this country lane where it was going to peter out. So there was a dead end. They were going to head, the grass was coming up for it. And they're going, this, what? The organization is heading for a dead end if we continue to do what we're doing. Mm. And then as they were walking along, somebody saw, and this is what happens when you're in nature, and this is hard to explain because it happens because we are innately built to notice patterns that relate to this. So there's a part of us that knows the solution. So for me, there's an inner wisdom that does want to talk to us, does want us to know the solution, and talks in metaphor. So it will go, oh, look, there's a hole in the hedge here. Shall we go through this hole in the hedge? So they were in the suits because they hadn't known they were coming to my session. So they pushed through the hole in the hedge. And there was a sort of a slight incline, and they went up the incline, and then they could see for miles around. Now, you can imagine, can you not? This team had been having a conversation. Oh, we're headed for a dead end. We're going to peter out. We're going to be no more. It's, we're doing the wrong things. And physically moving somewhere and all standing together side by side, looking out and going, we just need to do something different because the world's our oyster, or whatever the phrases they see. And then that's when I say, great, you've got it physically. It's like you've got a visceral experience of not this, but this. You've opened doors in your mind relating to, we don't want this, but this. Let's now go back into the meeting room. And let's now invite logic back, because logic now can do something with that visceral experience of not this, but this.
Absolutely impressive. And so to bring that kind of story to close the loop, were they in fact able to bring logic back and then come up with a strategy to avoid that?
Because I think they were quite a traditional board. They were this is how we've always done it. So I think there was method in the person bringing me in, because there was every possibility that if they'd continued to use the logical problem solving tools, they'd have been able to keep hold of this is how we've always done it mentality. Whereas getting them walking in, I think the beauty about metaphor is, and this is why I use it for me, is that when you're walking around in that landscape, you haven't got this is how it used to be, this won't work, this person won't, because you're not thinking about the people and all of that. So you are into, I think perhaps there's that element of it, you are into the how do we make this work. Mm-hmm. So you've left the negativity behind, possibly some of the infighting about this person wants to do this person wants to do that, one person's defending something. If you've actually all stood at the top of the hill and all agree, okay, we can really make this happen and do something different, when they come back, then some of that attachment to what they were saying previously has been loosened. And that's the same for individual clients that I work with and me, in terms of, I will absolutely defend my right to stay stuck because there's nothing, you know what I mean? Because the story I'm telling is the fact that, well, there isn't anything, because if I could do something, I would have done it by now, and I can't, whereas as soon as I go outside into nature, then suddenly it's the art of the possible.
I like the art of the possible. I love that. When you think about your earlier story about talking about that group, at the end of the day, when you're trying to troubleshoot a challenge that has been around for a while, it's important to walk away from that mentality of we've always done it this way, because how's that been working out for you, right? If you always do what you've always done, then you'll always get what you always got. Well, at the end of the day, if you're approaching it through logic, through brainstorming, through sitting in a meeting and trying to figure this out, then you're going to keep getting that same outcome or lack thereof. Mix it up a bit. get outside, walk in nature, take an entirely different approach to trying to solve this ongoing challenge. I absolutely love that. And I like the idea of mixing it up, the idea of getting out in nature. Personally, I walk in nature almost every single day, but I'm up here in Northern Ontario, so I've got the luxury of living, literally so remote that there's nature trails all around me. I think for those who live in a more, I guess, metropolitan center, what would you suggest?
Well, one of the things that you could do, and this is what I do in the book, Can't See the Wood for the Trees, but to be fair, you could just, to get a sense of it, you could go to my podcast, because this is what I do in the podcast, and I demonstrate in the podcast. So the podcast, Landscaping Your Life. And what I do is, what idiom would you use to describe your stuck situation? So the book is called Can't See the Wood for the Trees, because here in the UK, we would use that phrase. Now, it doesn't necessarily translate to every part of the world. So it could be can't see the forest for the trees, could be can't see the woods for the trees. So yeah, but nevertheless, when we're stuck, we might say stuck in a rut, going round in circles, out on a limb, feel like we're a fish out of water, uphill struggle, stuck between a rock and a hard place. So what I've noticed is when we're stuck, we use metaphors to describe ourselves, that stuck situation. Mm-hmm. So even as a team, and I have done it where I've sort of said, here are a few idioms which resonates most with the current situation. And if they all agree with one, we'll go with one. If there's possibly two or three of them, might split people up into a group and say, well, you go and look at that one, you look at that one, you look at that one, because the solutions you come back with can then be amalgamated into logic later. So let's go with the can't see the forest for the trees, woods for the trees. Is the premise is, what would you do? Because you're using the description to say, I'm stuck, I have no solutions, I don't know what to do. However, if you were in a forest stroke woods, what would you do to be able to see it for the trees? Oh, well, I'd follow a path out. I'd get a map. When I was doing it with one team, we were in a wood and we were embodying this, and like a ranger went past, and we were obviously looking lost, and she said, oh, do you need a map? And you couldn't make it. I mean, that's the thing. You can't make it up sometimes. What happens when you go out into nature? But anyway, I'm giving you an example of not in nature. So most people would be able to imagine it's like, oh, we could cut the trees down. We need to get to a higher vantage point. We might need to go and sit with one tree. Why are we trying to, focus on so many trees? One of the insights that I think is really interesting is we would stop planting more trees. Because quite often when you can't see the wood for trees about a problem, we've got some other person in the company or in the team busy putting more planting more trees. It's like, hang on a minute, we can't see the wood, we can't see the forest for those trees. Yeah. Can we just momentarily stop planting new trees until we've got a sense,
until we've got a handle on these trees and on this forest? Absolutely.
And it might be about, and the beauty about doing it in our imagination rather than in a real wood is you can't really cut trees down in a real wood, whereas if you were doing it in your imagination, you could, okay, how many trees do we need to cut down? You could draw it. Everybody could go, how many trees? What type of trees? Have we got too many different sorts of trees? Are some of the trees dying? I mean, the thing is...
Oh, it's endless.
Sorry?
The possibilities are endless.
It amazes me that 20 years or 23 years now, after first doing it, is that people still come up with things and I go, oh, I do it in the podcast, to be fair, because I've stopped doing the podcast from memory. It's like, you know what? I am going to take this phrase out into the landscape today, and I'm going to notice what I noticed today in this landscape. And so I quite often get excited about, I've never thought of that before.
Hey, if you could get excited about a new thought pattern on the daily, I think you're already winning in life.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
It's about expansion. It's about really evolving the way that you think about things. So on your podcast, I'm super excited that you've already shared that the podcast and the book. Let's first talk about the podcast. How frequently do you air it?
I've had 3 series, so we're in off peak at the moment. So I think I've done 65 episodes so far. So I do about 20 and then I have a break, 20 and then break. They've sort of morphed over time, but there is an index to tell you, oh, okay, go to this one. Because what I wouldn't suggest is that people will resonate with every one of them.
Okay.
Because
so what do you typically cover in one episode? You bring a new phrase and then you explore it?
Yeah, really. So it would be, we're going to do getting lost, or it might be we need to turn a corner, or it might be we're at a crossroads, and then we just notice what we notice. And what I've added in the last series is I now write poems as well. It's sort of in the landscape and share the poem at the end. But anyway, that's sort of, what's the other one that's gone down well is talking to a brick wall.
Yes.
So what I do is I go out and have a laugh because I'm there trying to talk to a brick wall and telling you what it's like to talk to a brick wall. And then people are walking past me thinking, why is she trying to talk to a brick wall? But anyway, so basically I embody the saying and share the insights I'm getting. And therefore, if somebody feels like they're talking to a brick wall or treading water, then they could, based on my observation, perhaps get insight or get enough of a sense of for themselves, because they might be imagining it themselves and be able to, because I'm sort of there, and they can go, all right, I can imagine that what I'm normally in, and that's got that there. So that's what I've tended to do for every episode. I mean, the first series I tried to put too much in, and I got logic things in there. It's like, that's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is using metaphor. So you know what? I'm just going to shove loads of metaphor and just have some fun in the episodes, and people can go elsewhere for their logical problems.
Absolutely. And I like that you kind of transport the audience into that visual, which is getting them to practice what you're kind of proposing they do. So I'm also hearing that regardless of where you live, be it in a city, be it, you can always do this kind of in your mind's eye, doing this in your mind and thinking, okay, here I am. And the one that resonated with me is being at a crossroads. So I'm picturing myself literally at a crossroads, but then start to look around. What am I actually seeing here? And then go from there. I'm going to be trying this. I am absolutely.
The interesting thing there is that somebody the other week, I was in a botanical gardens with them, and they said, I'm at a crossroads. And because the botanical gardens had got so many paths, it was great because we could practice. It's like, you're at a crossroads. What are you going to do? And literally, and I don't know how we did it, every time they came to a crossroads, and I still get goosebumps now, they chose the path that did not have a sign. And what they realized, and it was a huge revelation for them, was that in work, they kept applying for jobs where people had already gone there before, and it wasn't working. Whereas actually what they realized was they needed an innovation, be a director of innovation that was going and actually bringing new stuff to the organization. And it was just huge for them. And it was literally just observing the pattern of behavior in relation to the crossroads we were coming across.
That is awesome. I love it. I really like that you're offering your listeners kind of a method, something you can try, because I know that there are people out there, there are listeners who have been either contending with an ongoing issue with their team, contending with an ongoing issue with themselves personally. Get outside, find the metaphor, and then look around and try and figure out what might be at play here.
Turning corners in nature are, I still dread it in one respect, because I'm out there with a coaching client and I'll think, is this the day that turning this corner isn't going to provide the insight they need? And it always does. And it's just, gorgeous. Because there's fear before the corner. It's like, I don't know what's around the corner, but I know I want to turn the corner. And as soon as you've done it in nature and you've got the insight, turning the corner that you need to in your life is so much easier.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm at a loss for words, which really, for anyone listening who's listened to more than one episode, doesn't happen quite frequently. So thank you, Alison. That is so powerful. And I myself will be trying it. And I hope some of my listeners will be trying it. So to summarize, all we've heard today is whether you're feeling stuck with your team or yourself personally, get outside in nature, find a metaphor, and go from there. Any last tidbit of wisdom that you would like to, if I had to ask you, okay, this is it, you only get one tidbit of wisdom to impart on our audience, what might that be?
Going up slight tangent, in it, notice the language you're using. Because so often, so this is like this week's real enthusiasm. It's that if you're looking for solutions and you're not finding them, it could be that you need to look for answers, and you do. So it's like really be pernickety about the language you're using to define either your current problem or what it is you're trying to do, because sometimes it's a bit like if you've gone and stored all of your answers in the answers folder and you're looking for solutions. I was on Dropbox and I couldn't find anything the other day because me and my PA had put them in different places. And she'll be listening to this, so sorry. But but I couldn't find it. But it's a bit like that we could have put all of our lovely sort of creative and innovative ideas in a and I can't remember what I called it now, but in a folder called solutions, and we're going, I'm looking for answers. And then wonder why we can't find them. And I know that sounds odd, but it's so powerful. I had somebody who was looking for, I can't remember, was looking for answers. And when we said searching for solutions, so sometimes you need to change the verb as well. And you might want to go, I'm searching for innovative solutions. So it might be an adjective as well. So absolutely. Problem, if you call it, everybody says they haven't got a problem. But all of these tools are called problem-solving tools. So if you've got a conundrum, you don't have conundrum-solving tools. You don't have challenge-solving tools. So it's like, is it any wonder we can't find the tools to try and find the outcome we want? Because it's hidden in the folder called problem-solving. And we're going, I haven't got a problem. So be really, 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 really careful about your the words
the language you use and the words that you use. Very, very, very good tip in terms of understanding how you might be getting in your own way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And when you initially started talking about this, and listeners, I will have like a 5-minute chit chat with my guest ahead of time, just to give them an idea of how the entire episode is going to unfold, more or less, that it's a conversation. I do some preliminary research on the guests themselves. And that's about it. So when she initially started to share that we need to get creative, I internally cringed because I am not you asked me to draw a person, to draw an image. It's a stick figure. You asked me, I was in a workshop a couple of weeks ago and they asked us to draw the service we offer in an image. And I literally wanted to leave the meeting. And they said, we need you to make it as simple as possible. I was like, yes, now you're speaking my language. So I literally had an unhappy face and a happy face because I help, unhappy workers and unhappy workplaces become happier ones. That's the depth of my creative juices. So when you explain going out in nature and it's more about just observing, I think anyone can observe. Anyone has the ability to look around and to figure out, if I were to consider what I'm looking at as the challenge, the pickle, the whatever the
pickle. Oh, cool. Must write that down. Pickle. Yeah, I love that word.
The conundrum that you're contending with. If this was it here, what do you need to be aware of? What are some of the elements that might be at play? What am I looking around? And I like the idea of turning a corner. checking in with yourself. What was going on in you when you were about to turn that corner?
Yeah.
Fear. Were you reluctant? Did in the back of your mind, you had to proceed regardless. So how might you be getting in your own way in not turning that corner, in not proceeding with it?
But even when you get round the corner, I've had such, the sun will come out or it's a straight line and people go, oh my God, I'm thinking turning the corner is going to be hard work. And this is telling me it's a straight path. So what happens is you notice the pattern once you get round the other side of it, which is it's as if you get the motivation and inspiration because of what you notice once you've gone round the corner.
Yeah. And I imagine that you often realize that I was making it up to be much harder.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alison. This was
Pleasure.
Incredibly insightful. If people want to continue connecting with you or want to listen to your podcast or would like to get a copy of your book, whereabouts can they do that?
The best thing, because there's lots of Alison Smiths, so so the best bit is Landscaping Your Life, because Landscaping Your Life on Amazon will find the book as well, even though it's Can't See the Wood for the Trees, because it's Can't See the Wood for the Trees, Landscaping Your Life. It's the Landscaping Your Life podcast. I'm on TikTok as Landscaping Your Life, Instagram Landscaping Your Life, LinkedIn Landscaping Your Life. So you'll find me, Facebook Landscaping Your Life. So Landscaping Your Life will find me more than Alison Smith will.
Well, folks, Landscaping Your Life. We will make sure that we put all of the relevant links in our show notes. Now, listeners, as I do every single episode, I need you to write down one tidbit, one action you could take based on what you've just heard today. Maybe it's identifying a problem. Maybe you already have the problem and you are the challenge or the pickle. And I need you to get outside and figure out one thing you can do to try and improve on that and go do it. Well, folks, thanks for joining us for yet another enriching conversation. To hear more about today's guests, make sure to check out the links in the description of this episode. Want to continue the conversation? Then head on over to our social media platforms, all of which are also linked in the description, to keep it going. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss another valuable episode.